On June 11th, 2023, Pluto Retrograde re-enters Capricorn for the first time since March 23rd. So here, in honor of that big deal transit, as well as to talk about some other major astro weather coming up in the next few months, I've got Timothy Glenn again for round 3 of our Pluto series. So welcome, Tim. And where should we start? There's a lot going on.
There is a lot going on, and we're getting ready to go into retrograde season now, too. Not just Pluto. It's going to be a lot of fun. But Pluto doing the quintuple transit back and forth over this cusp from Capricorn into Aquarius, back and forth, is really going to be a major league game changer for this whole world. So let's just pan the camera back a little bit and talk about big picture stuff. Pluto, well, on one level, yeah, it's wrecking balls and bulldozers coming in. Urban renewal, we're going to tear down the old stuff, maybe even down to bedrock level, and then we're going to bring in something completely different, like the age of Aquarius. Pluto brings about massive transformation wherever that energy is playing out, and we spent about a decade and a half with it going through Sagittarius, so the challenge for transformation for us was in the overarching philosophy of life, the universe, and everything. And so once Sagittarius is done, we have, the game in Pluto, which started in 2008. And it did the full triple transit over that cusp in 2008, ended on Thanksgiving Day here in the States. And the philosophies we have in Sagittarius then get grounded and structured in Capricorn. So we can have our philosophies of what is the universe, what is life, and so on and so forth. And we take those philosophies into Capricorn, we end up with the organized religions. And we have our philosophies of how to cultivate and distribute resources and so on and so forth. We take that energy into Capricorn and we end up with the Federal Reserve and the central banking system, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, we have our philosophies of how we can get along without killing each other in this world. That's been a challenge for a long time. And so we take those philosophies and we bring them into Capricorn, and there you have your governments. So Pluto's long journey through Capricorn is going to be focused on transforming this whole external structure that we've accepted as this is just the way life is. And now, with it working its way into Aquarius, we say, well, maybe this isn't the way it really is. So it's time for the big transformation. And in the Capricorn part of it, now that we've had our taste of Pluto being at the beginning of Aquarius, we go back into Capricorn and we're like, oh, yuck. Oh, we used to accept this stuff as okay. We used to put up with this. No, we've had this taste of that revolutionary energy of Pluto going into Aquarius, and it's going back into Capricorn and going, oh, well, screw this. So the wrecking balls and bulldozers will probably be manifest in taking down some of the really significant old world structures. So it's been based on lack, limitation, struggle, domination, and submission, and all that rubbish. And it'll be interesting to watch the way it plays out.
And so I think we could do a little bit of a recap of that kind of 2.5 month period of Pluto in Aquarius, because there was certainly a lot of energy around that. And as we mentioned in our first video together, that's just a preview, right? That's just kind of like, hey, this is what might be coming. This is, if you like it, then go for it. And if you don't like it, then we can make adjustments while Pluto's in Capricorn again. So in terms of bigger picture things, what sorts of things did you notice that that you feel are going to be up for review during this time in Capricorn?
During the phase, especially while it was direct, Pluto in Aquarius was really stirring up a lot of deep desire in people for something new that's actually grassroots level, user friendly. And it's right here. Remember, we talked about this, the old top down pyramid structure of authority and so forth. And there was so much heartfelt energy all over the place with people just saying, wow, we could actually live without this old structure. We can do this. Of course, the old structure is telling us, oh no, you can't make it without us. We're in charge. So that was a really wonderful thing to feel, because people of all different stripes and colors were feeling the same thing. And a lot of people really getting into our internet chatter about how we've had enough of the rubbish.
Mm-hmm.
So just that, but even though that's like kind of negative, it's like, oh God, that old stuff. But really, what was really spurring it on was the idealism that was starting to come out, and more discussion about why the hell are we paying, we're working like slaves, paying people for bits of energy when we are the infinite energy field.
Mm-hmm.
And we know there are all these technologies that could provide so much energy of different kinds for us. And that's a big thing in the Aquarian age, is especially Pluto works its way in. It's going to transform the way we produce and share energy on all levels.
Mm-hmm. So just to kind of give people some of the timeline, because you and I look at the dates all the time, but the listeners may not be as aware of the timing. So March 23rd, Pluto entered Aquarius for the first time, and then stationed retrograde on May 1st. And then on June 11th, still retrograde, moving back into Capricorn. And then on October 10th, stations direct in Capricorn, and then doesn't re-enter Aquarius until, I think it's your birthday, right?
Yes,
January 21st of 2024. So we do have a period of review that may kind of feel like a little bit of a letdown after all that excitement, after all that energy. And then it's kind of like, oh, well, it hasn't really changed yet. So but there are some pretty mega transits happening this summer and into the fall. So I know one that I've been dreaming about. I didn't actually realize that it was this. I kept dreaming about people who had birthdays on July 16th or July 17th. And I've been having these dreams for years. And I was like, what? Why are these people in my dreams? And then when I started really looking at the forecast for the year, I realized, oh, well, that's when the North Node moves from Taurus into Aries, which of course triggers that April 19th, 20th eclipse again, but also squares Pluto back in Capricorn, 29 Capricorn. So do you want to share any insights about that particular transit?
Yeah, that's going to be fun when we get to that part of July. Because, that's the one on the 17th. It's like, okay, the nodal axis is shifting, which means that its work is finished with the global financial axis.
Mm.
So we're going to see some serious shifting in how the resources are generated on that level, and so on and so forth. And of course, there's going to be a lot of resistance from the old guard. They're not going to go down without a fight, but that's all they know.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to the 17th, and now we make that shift. And then, of course, Venus is going to go retrograde.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, on the 22nd of July. Yeah.
Okay, that's very cool. And that's going to be fun. But then you get to the 29th, and that's when we have the exact square of the nodal axis to Pluto.
Mm-hmm.
Another fun T-square there. So we could put it forth that for us, this will be a peaceful transition, because we're not out there fighting the fight. There are other souls who volunteered to come in and do that. And thank you. We did it in other lifetimes, and we're finished with that. And so this is really a tremendous opportunity to take this whole perspective of what life has been in the old world and be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say with Aries, that energy is very different than Taurus. And so the North Node always moves backwards. And so it's going from 0, Taurus to 29 degrees 59 minutes Aries. But that energy, I mean, they are kind of self-sufficient signs, right? So with Taurus, you mentioned the financial sector, but it's the earth, right? It's like gardening and food supply, our body. So the physical, tangible reality. And then with Aries, even though it's retrograding into Aries, that's the first sign. So we're talking like that's fresh, new energy, a kind of like a pioneer kind of energy. And so it's an interesting tension in that we had this kind of Aquarius breakout for a couple months, and then Pluto moves back into Capricorn, old guard structure stuff. But then, very soon after, the North Node kind of collective trajectory moves much more towards newness and energy. And so all these people are contacting me like, oh my gosh, it's so horrible in the world right now. Like the news cycle, are they going to do, central bank digital currency? Are they going to take over our food supply? Are they doing, like there's a lot of panic. But when I look at the transits that are happening now through like 2025 at least, they're very liberating transits. They're the kind of overall energy where, yeah, the old guard will make some moves to try to solidify things, but it's like it's dissolving.
Yeah, the old guard is still spinning the narratives, but it's like they are losing more viewership as they go. Because people are so much more capable of seeing through the lies. They keep spinning these tales, and the facts just don't bear out.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, that's all right. So back to the Aries Libra axis there. One of the things we can all do that would help immensely with this amazing evolutionary game we're in is to shift our identity.
Mm.
And with that nodal axis, we're going to be looking at things regarding identity. I was asked several years ago by someone who just stopped by, and she had said that she identifies as blah, blah, blah. So here's the identity. And so then she asked, how do you identify? And I just paused for a moment, and I said, I don't. Okay. There is only the one infinite energy field. So, all right, I'm the field. But this whole identity crisis that we've been going through individually and collectively now has an opportunity to really resolve. Mm-hmm. Because we've been taught, especially in the old Capricornian structure, that you are just this struggling little earthling. You're a pathetic little snotling from 3D planet Earth. That's all you are and ever will be. This is like, sorry, now we've seen beyond, because the old Matrix program is crashing. Mm-hmm. And it's, to illustrate that, it's like there are like cracks in the sky, which allow us to peer through, and we start seeing, the real universe there. Mm-hmm. So how do we identify in the midst of that? And how does humanity collectively identify? Mm-hmm. So, we may go through a lot of energy flying around as people go through their own processing of stepping up their identity. Mm-hmm. So another thing we could learn here with this axis is a little bit of decisiveness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Remember, if we're talking Aries North Node, we're talking Libra South Node.
Right.
Yeah. And talk about traditionally indecisive energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the South Node's always like the negative exploration, the negative path of that sign. So even though Libra is the peacemaker, if it was the North Node, it would be peacemaker, partnership. But really for the South Node, we're looking more like indecisiveness, codependency, wishy-washiness, right?
Yeah. Flashing back to the early 90s here of reading some article, and like it was all about indecisiveness and so forth. And the writer said, this is as bad as a double Libra trying to make a decision. So, we can get a little more grounded and open and do some discipline and so forth during that venture as we go through that nodal axis. But that focus we can gain is going to be fueled by all the big stuff that's going on in a greater context, which involves quite a bit right now.
One of the things too, that where even though it's a square with Pluto and the nodal axis, where I see an area for expansion and really moving forward is, so you got that kind of Capricornian ruthlessness, right? Which in general, we think of ruthlessness as not a good thing, right? Like not a good quality. But in terms of energy expenditures, in terms of what are you putting your attention towards, what are you putting your energy towards, especially with Pluto in these final degrees of Capricorn, I feel like there is this call to kind of look at the pros and cons, look at the balance sheet and really be ruthless. Like, okay, this part of my life or this part of our society is just not working anymore. What can we do? How can we pioneer to make things better? And so that Capricornian, Pluto cutting away of things with the North Node in Aries, I feel like that's actually more harmonious in some ways than the North Node in Taurus, because of all the collective signs for wanting to hold on. Taurus is really more about how do we maintain the status quo? How do we hold on? How do we, not let go of stuff? And with Aries, I just feel like, again, even though it's a square, there is this energy of like, okay, we've evaluated, we've reevaluated, we've done this since 2008. Like, what are we going to do? Because it's getting to be go time.
Yeah, and when it comes to go time, Aries is pretty adept at that one.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, ruled by Mars. All right, here we go. So it's going to be a time for decisive action. And for most of us, it's not like we take to the streets and do all that crazy wild stuff, but a square can be user-friendly if we take whatever appropriate action is there in front of us. If we're going to shy away from it, well, okay, good luck. But when it comes to go time, we need to be ready to go. So we've been going through these processes here because we're getting prepared for go time.
Yeah. And I know some, doomers are going to be like, oh, but Aries is the sign of war and, World War III. And, is it go time for that? I feel like that is probably the way that, the powers that want to stay are going to try to push things. I think that's pretty obvious that that's what they're trying to do. But again, with our identity and with this pioneering, forging ahead, it doesn't matter what came before. That's the beauty of the North Node in Aries, is that all that history, it's like, well, yeah, that's history, but where are we going? Where are we headed? And so I do feel like this is a really expansive opportunity.
Sure. And with the Aquarian energy, as we move more into the real age of Aquarius, it's much more future oriented, and it's more geared toward what can we become, what can we create, what kind of wonderful processes can we be part of here. So we look back at what has been and we just think, well, so what? In one of our earlier discussions, I mentioned that in the Proterian channelings, they often say, if you base your future on your past, you're screwed. So whatever, we're finished with that old stuff. And that's a major thing that Pluto does. It tears down the old and is done with it. As I mentioned before,
that can be good.
Yeah. Unlike Saturn, Pluto does not do remodeling jobs. Yeah, it's like, okay, we're going to take it down all the way to bedrock level. We're going to build something completely different now. So that's the fun part of it. And to turn our imaginations loose now. What can we do with all this? What about the technologies that have been suppressed and other technologies that would be able to come out that we haven't even thought of yet? That's going to be, once we have this phase finished, it's just going to be burgeoning left and right all over the place. It's just that we're getting squeezed through the skinny part of the hourglass.
Yeah.
And when we went through this jolt as we entered the month of June here, I was just thinking of Obi-Wan Kenobi in the very first Star Wars film, where felt that disturbance in the Force. That really rocked us. So I was thinking, okay, yeah, whew, where are we going? What are we doing here? It's like whatever has been is like, okay, that has served its purpose. But this Capricornian energy, like Saturn, when Saturn comes around in any tender part of our chart, the tendency is, like, to use a gardening analogy, you prune out the old stuff that's in the way of the new growth.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to see some interesting pruning done as Pluto retrogrades back into Capricorn, because it's going to be 4 months retrograde in Capricorn before it even goes direct.
Yeah.
So we may see some interesting controlled demolition of old structures here.
Mm-hmm. Well, and a note on June 1st, because that was, of course, when Jupiter and the North Node conjuncted in Taurus. And when you and I were discussing this, I mean, it affected different people different ways. Definitely, I sensed a disturbance in the force, and I was hearing about it from clients. But a lot of the people that I was hearing from, and I know in my own life, now, granted, that point was my part of fortune. So like, that's my happy spot in my chart. So it didn't seem to affect me in like a negative way, but it was just like a synchronicity storm. I mean, just like wild amounts of things connecting, and dreams from 4 years ago, dreams from 2 years ago, other people's dreams, other people, that I had sensed, oh, these people have a connection with each other, but it was never clear. It was like, oh, that's just a weird, psychic hit or delusion or whatever. But it all played out where, oh, all these people are interacting, they are connecting. And so a lot of these transits, it's high energy, and that's going to depend on what do we have going on in our own lives, what do we have going on in our natal charts, progressions, etc. But definitely June 1st, I feel like with that Jupiter, expansive energy on the North Node, it was kind of like a collective heads up, like, hey, start paying attention here because things are getting more intense.
Yes, and of course that's then stimulating that South Node in Scorpio, and so that's bringing up a lot of that old stuff,
right,
that hasn't been healed, it hasn't been resolved yet. And on that, I'd like to add a little numerology to it, because calendar wise, we're in the year 2023, which is a 7 cycle, which in the 1 through 9 cycle, the agricultural analogy is that's the harvest, which brings a kind of a karmic element to it. Okay, like, well, what did we sow? Well, there's your crop, this is what you're going to reap. But also 20 plus 23 is 43. And in the Pythagorean system that I use, 43 is the primary number of spiritual healing. In fact, I brought the card out. Card 43 is the 3 of Cups.
Oh, beautiful.
So, it is. It's wonderful. However, there's a little catch. Welcome to the Matrix. There's always a catch. So we see the women dancing, celebrating the harvest, but they don't show you the hard work that it took to get the harvest. Some minor detail. I mean, harvest time is wonderful when you have all those veggies come out in your garden, but what did it take to get that? So a lot of people who know just enough to be a little dangerous will look at their own numerological cycles and they say, oh, I'm going to be in a 43 cycle. That's spiritual healing. And it's like some little angel's going to come along with a magic wand and bing, and all the symptoms go away. But if we have the seeds of any illness, dis-ease, dysfunction, whatever inside of us, it's going to come to the surface so that we can resolve it.
Right.
So that's going to take a little bit of that drive and that Jupiter expansion, and also then the faith that this is really going to work out. Because, we're going to have some stuff coming like we don't right now. A lot of old stuff is coming out. How many people have old memories coming up, like people in your life that had an impact for a while and you haven't even thought of them in years and years and years? And the feeling is up with it, with that Scorpio South Node, you're going to be feeling it. And if we just pause with that, we don't need to analyze everything. We can just feel it and say, oh my God, yeah, I remember that. I remember what was going on. You remember what it felt like to even be existing in this world at that time. And whew, you're so grateful you're not there anymore. Because then we can appreciate how much we have expanded, how much we have grown. So that heads up is also helping us see what we have accomplished. Because in many ways, there's a really nice harvest for us here.
Yeah.
And what about things emotionally, physically, like the old injuries, the old wounds, like physically? What about the old sports injuries? I've been reminded of a few here. It's like,
oh yeah,
I remember that one. Oh yeah, okay. Hadn't thought of it in years and years and years, and then you remember, oh well, yeah, that guy on the soccer field did this, and yeah, couldn't stop me. So all he could do is take my back foot out from under me, and well, there went my knee. It's like, okay,
knees are up.
Yeah.
Knees are up big time right now. I'm hearing that from so many clients. I've had like sort of weird freak accidents with my own knees lately. And so there's something with knees, and I know there's like a Saturn component to that as well with the knee. And we should probably talk a little bit about Saturn and Pisces, because it's not just Pluto that's moving into Capricorn, but Saturn also stations retrograde on June 17th. So we're getting a lot of 17s, like June 17th, July 17, but Saturn stationing retrograde in Pisces. Again, we're in this kind of like review phase, right? So our first video that we did together, Saturn had just entered Pisces, and we were preparing for Pluto to enter Aquarius. Now Pluto is moving back from Aquarius, and then Saturn's going to stay in Pisces, not going to go back into Aquarius, but almost, right? Like just to the very, very beginning of Pisces. And so this, how does that play into this whole mix that we're talking about?
I really like this whole game with that element thrown in, because Saturn in Pisces really does give us a lot of relief from that strict mechanical approach of like Saturn in Capricorn. As you had mentioned before, it's like we had this collective PTSD going through Saturn in Capricorn, and then Aquarius as well. But this is like you take that rigid, structured engineering approach of Saturn and Capricorn type energy, and you throw it into the ocean. And so it's just kind of swimming around in here. And so, and I mentioned my one friend who thought that it was early onset of dementia. And I said, no, that's just Saturn in Pisces now. So that's big picture. And now also when we have the next Mercury retrograde coming up, that's going to be interesting, because that's, again, Mercury retrograde while Saturn is retrograde in Pisces. So whatever we thought we knew, well, maybe not.
Yeah.
We open up to the dreaming possibilities here.
Well, and the interesting thing about Mercury is Mercury and Pluto have really been kind of making moves, like almost like coordinated moves, not necessarily aspecting each other, but doing things kind of on the same day. So the day that Pluto re-enters Capricorn, Mercury moves into Gemini. So there's an exact trine, but it's really brief, right? It's like crossing in the night. But there is this kind of like download potential, and Mercury very strong in Gemini, and also very strong in Virgo. So that later Mercury retrograde that's going to be all in Virgo, it's going to be interacting with Uranus and Taurus with the trines. It's going to be opposing Neptune in Pisces. And then we've got eventually when Mercury leaves Virgo, another exact trine with Pluto in late Capricorn. So just some interesting energies that I feel are very supportive for kind of reprogramming, like what's not working here with our view of the world.
Yeah, and there are going to be a lot of things coming up within ourselves where, from the Saturn in Pisces perspective, especially while it's retrograde, we're just going to look at it and say, click on uninstall. Whatever. That's part of that old world. And so this is going to help us get a richer and fuller feel for the possibilities of structures in the future that would be more user-friendly and would really facilitate what we want to be able to do here. Because when it comes right down to it, life on planet Earth could be like really, really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like for years I've said, well, yeah, it's an interesting rough draft, but it's still pretty rough. But now it's like, okay, now it's time to go beyond the rough draft phase with the big dreams. And all of these things that we're talking about will help facilitate opening our consciousness. And as I mentioned before, be prepared to expand our conceptual framework. What is possible? It is the field of infinite possibilities. And I just flashed back to an interesting conversation with one of these real right-wing Christians. And as I'm just sharing my perspectives, this guy is like, oh, you know, the Bible thumpers. He has the Bible close and he's thumping it. And he says, from what we know from God's word, the Holy Bible, that's impossible. So I said, now you're thumping a Bible that tells us with God, all things are possible.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we open ourselves up really to the infinite potential that we are, this is really the phase we want to go through, as uncomfortable as it may be, because really all of that discomfort is just showing us where we still have attachments to the old structures, where we haven't let go yet, where we haven't healed old wounds and whatever.
Well, and another interesting thing on June 11th is Venus squares Jupiter. So Venus in Leo squares Jupiter in Taurus that day. And so there's like another highly charged energy around that day. And just speaking of faith and kind of being able to navigate some of these tricky things, because for a lot of people, you know, if you have a firmly held belief, you do not want to let that go. You know, that's, you know, most people are clinging pretty hard to those old beliefs. Again, Saturn in Pisces, it's sort of washing it away a little bit. But with Venus squaring Jupiter, I also feel like, you know, there's the planet of self-esteem, right? Venus. And with the square, and you and I have talked about this, that squares from Venus are still pretty nice and productive, especially with Jupiter. But there is this kind of energy of optimism and hope and belief, and like, how can we navigate that with our own values, with our own self-esteem, and how can we do it in a harmonious and beautiful way? So with Venus ruling Libra, South Node Libra, we do get a little bit of help, right? So there's that codependency and wishy-washiness, the negative aspects of Libra, but at the same time that Pluto is moving into Capricorn, and at the same time that later on in July, the North Node moves into Aries. Again, I just think Venus in Leo is a huge deal this year, right? Like 4 months of Venus in Leo because of her retrograde. Yeah.
And last time we had talked about how Venus coming up where Mars has already pinged things, Venus can put the soft touch on. She can do damage control and so forth, because she can always add that touch of niceness and beauty and whatever. You know, it's like, yeah, so Venus coming into Leo, which can also be one of those signs that can be a little too much, go for it. She can help channel that energy so that we can have that greater vision. And Venus is part of that greater vision. Well, she's very associated with Earth, you know, ruling Taurus, and that's like Gaia's sister.
Right.
All right. So this is like, okay, this is an energy to add to this. So instead of taking our Leo energy and we're going to go forward with it, it's like, forward where and for what? So she can help color it in, and okay, this is nice. We're actually going from the battlefield to the garden. In fact, the very first book I ever read specifically about the lunar nodes, it was the Taurus North Node and Scorpio South Node, the discussion of Paramahansa Yogananda. Okay, I looked at that, thought, oh wow, cool, because I'm dealing with that in my chart. And the statement was made, this was Yogananda's opportunity to have a lifetime where he walks off the battlefield as Arjuna and goes into the garden. So we've been prepped here. Get ready to move into the garden.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Venus likes the garden.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be fun. And of course, that, we are going to be going into retrograde season now. So it's going to be fascinating to watch, especially once we get into early September. Yeah, we're going to have an interesting time, because with Pluto retrograde all the way, into, for 3rd of October, that's like, okay, let's take a look at this, because there is such an energy just in our collective that we've had enough. It's like enough is enough. Over, done. And so with the so-called news and the propaganda that's been going on, so many people see through it, and people are just fed up with this anyway. So this energy of enough is going to give that collective energy to those who are helping bring down the controlling structures of the old system. And yeah, there are people who are still scared of that. Because Pluto's going to take it all down. And so some people will ask, well, everything. I mean, even the economy. And some people, even with quivering voices, even the economy. And I would say, especially the economy. It's been one of the major tools of enslavement of humanity. So the way I see it, really big picture is, we will have a time where we have instituted a user-friendly system that's not predatory like the old system, and money will not be created as debt, because that's the old Babylonian money magic game that's been going on for thousands of years. Money created as debt. So if your society accepts that system, you're a collective debt slave to whoever the people are at the top of that pyramid, convincing you that you can't exist without us, whereas the power is down at the base with all those rose quartz crystals there. And also, in one of your recent videos, you talked about, with this energy in Taurus, working with crystals, working with earth. That's going to help so much. So one of the things with the propaganda machine out here is another part of the dark magic that they've done for so long is they will prep you for a narrative even years in advance. So plant these seeds, and so when it happens, it's like, okay, well, this was predictive programming, and people buy into it. Now, I was warning people back in 2013 not to buy the little hints that were given, like, oh, there's going to be all this trouble in Ukraine, because they're taking your universal creative energy and they're funneling into this potential trouble, which means inadvertently, most people here are going to feed their creative energy into creating what they don't want. Because they believe the narrative, they believe the propaganda, and so they say, oh yeah, well, this is happening, and this is why, and this is blah, 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 blah. And so their blah, 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 blah energy goes into helping create what they least want.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I think the Aries energy is going to be a positive thing, because Aries is like, no, I'm not doing that. I got to go my own way. And if your way is more exciting for you, or just more creative, or just something different. The whole time you've been talking, I just keep seeing the 8 of Cups card. So like in Tarot, the 8 trophies all lined up, they're not bad cups, but he's had enough. He's walking away, and you see him with his cape. There we go. That's what I've been seeing. So I feel like that's kind of where we're at right now on a society level. Not everybody is there, but it does feel like we're kind of reaching that tipping point in the next few months.
Yeah, and that ties right into the big picture thing that is really the central theme of this phase, and that's Pluto working its way into Aquarius. Because back to, okay, what did we experience and what did we sense going on with Pluto and Aquarius? Well, just like you were just talking about, okay, we have the lunar nodes now. North node goes into Aries. It's like, okay, well, what did we just taste with that brief foray of bringing the Plutonian energy into Aquarius? It's like, oh, yeah, okay, let's go. Yeah, it's like, the cups. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing bad, wrong, evil, or anything else with the cups. They're nice and neatly stacked up. Oh,
Right.
cool. But wearing the red robe of desire, we turn our back and we go to the mountain. This is an energy that always wants to take us to the next higher level. And that's card 48. 4 plus 8 is 12, like Pisces. And 12, like the Hanged Man. I'd rather call that one the Mystic. And it's energy that to the muggles or whatever, the normies out here who haven't woken up to this yet, they think it's all crazy. Like, you're upside down according to them. So anything that has that 12 energy in the mix is going to be something that, in order to do this, you're going to do something that's not from the book. It's going to be new, unique, and weird, and the muggles aren't going to understand it. They're going to say, where are you going? Look, those cups are so nice and neatly stacked up, and it's 8. Ooh, yeah, it's 8. That's very nice. Ooh, cool. And there's just something in you that says, I must go to the mountain.
Yeah. And that's that Aries energy too, the pioneer, I mean, and all of this, we should probably mention, is occurring when Pluto moves back into Capricorn. It is creeping back closer to the U.S. natal Pluto again for another big hurrah of the U.S. Pluto return. And so, all of this kind of energy is up right now. And with, 4th of July energies and all of that, it's like the question of identity is really up for the United States right now with Pluto having the Pluto return. I mean, in any country, the question of identity is up at that time because it's up for destruction. But the question is what rises from that destruction? Yeah.
And for the American identity, it was stated recently, some guy I was not familiar with, he's in some position of authority now in India, and he was saying it's time for the Europeans, and hence also Americans, to understand that their problems are not the world's problems. And it's like, okay, you guys have been ruling the roost for so long, and it's like, get over it. So, yeah, the American identity is going to go through its own identity crisis, because we're going to realize that, the U.S. petrodollar does not really have a rightful place in ruling the earth. So,
and that's already happening.
Yeah. In fact, just it was like the 22nd of March, just before we had that shift of Pluto moving into Aquarius, it was all over the propaganda channels here. That, of course, they put their own spin on it, but we had Russia and China make this agreement to build this pipeline, taking the resources down to China from Russia, because Russia's got loads and loads, and they would be bypassing the American dollar. These transactions would be done in the Chinese yuan, and so, well, gee, guys, the day of American hegemony through its, did you ever read John Perkins? It's a book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
I've heard of it, though.
Like, his game was to go in and get them to sign on and become a national debt slave to the American petrodollar. And if they didn't, then the CIA would destabilize the region and so on and so forth. So those days are done. That's over. And just the feel in the collective now that we've had this experience, like Pluto got out of that, after doing a lot of this work to undermine the old system. Here's a taste of Aquarius, and now we're going to go back and just say, oh, screw this. There's just so much energy in our collective that is just going to be supportive of taking the old system down.
Yeah. It also reminds me of kind of when like if you go on a trip somewhere and you have, you're on vacation or you're visiting for work or whatever, but you go there and it's like everything's different because you're a different person in that location. And then you go back home and it's like, oh. Nothing feels like home anymore. Nothing feels right anymore. But it can feel like a downer. I mean, it can feel sort of depressing, but it can also really motivate you because you've gotten that taste, you've gotten that sense. And, sometimes you move to the place, sometimes you go back on another trip that's longer. But in any case, it's like it planted the seed. It's like you got that idea that this is not all that there is. And so I do feel like that. Also, in addition to Saturn in Pisces, it eases the willingness to let things go because you've caught sight of something that could be as good or even better than what you're currently experiencing.
Yeah, and that's a great analogy because we've all had times when we've taken trips and it's like, great, you don't have your old patterning around you.
Mm-hmm.
You're not driving down the same streets and being in the same buildings and talking to the same people who all are projecting their image of you at you. You're in a whole new environment. And then you go back and it's like, oh, this is that old stuff I didn't heal yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these are the things that I accepted that are really bogus.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things that I really didn't take care of when it might have been wiser to take care of them. And so, yeah, that's a motivator.
Yeah.
And that's
or you didn't
analogy.
Even know, right? You didn't even know that this was somehow lacking because you had never experienced something different. And that was kind of the change in March with Saturn, Pluto, and Mars all changing signs in pretty rapid fire succession. Plus, the equinox and all of there's just a lot of energy in March. And it just it shook people out of the status quo.
Yeah, and that's another thing for the American shift of identity here is this complacency that the American collective has gotten into by virtue of a criminal network that was just using the people, of course, fleecing them. Wow, this is ready to all shift. And yeah, the shifts aren't real comfy, cushy. It's like when the old sports injury goes, oh, remember when that happened? Oh, yeah, well, my knee is remembering and my hip is remembering. Yeah, okay, but now it's up so it can be resolved.
Mm-hmm.
So much. And that's another thing about the big picture, having Pluto move into Aquarius with the new technologies. Ooh, what can we do for health and healing? We've heard of med beds and so forth. Well, we have technologies that can shift our energies tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, if we feel a little stuck, it's simply telling us that, all right, that's just something else that needs to come out and be resolved.
Yeah. And really for fuller healing, I find that in the healing work that I do with people that sometimes, you heal as far as you can so that you can get on with your life, but then things cycle back around for more complete healing. And it's not comfortable. It feels like a step back, but if you fully get the healing this time, because now you have the strength, you have the motivation, you've seen that you've like got something where you're like, oh, I don't want to be disabled for this, or, oh, I don't want to be impaired for this. Like, I want to really fully engage. That's that Aries energy where it can really give you the strength and the drive and the courage to actually complete the healing that was kind of lingering at just enough of a healing so that you could function. But what I feel like humanity and individuals are being offered is the chance to really thrive.
Yeah, not just survive, but truly thrive.
Yeah.
And especially with all this activity in Taurus, think of what that energy can do if we really go into it, heart, soul, and everything in us. Wow, this can really be awesome living as a human in this world. Earth is cool. It's just that we've had a little bit of a glitch here. But Yeah, it may not be real comfortable. And you had said that, there are different levels of healing. You don't necessarily get it all at one time. And so it'll cycle back around. Because there are so many people who will like really work on an issue, but we are several levels deep here. Let's say you've got an issue that's 27 levels deep in your subconscious. Okay, so you do this workshop and you really work on this, and so you take those first 2 levels off, and go, and then you've just got 25 more levels down.
Yeah.
But eventually it's going to come up to the surface, and you're going to say, "Oh, I thought I healed that. I thought I solved that." Well, yeah, okay. So then you work at it and you do another level. Okay, you got 24 more levels still down there. And when it comes to the surface, it's like, okay, now I'm pissed. I thought I did this. And so you go at it and you work with some cool practitioner and you clear off 3 levels. Yeah. Ooh. Well, there's still got more, but it's not infinite.
Right.
But we get conditioned to think that, as you mentioned in the last discussion, people then think there's no way to be healthy. There's no way to be whole. But this is the field of infinite possibilities, and we are that field.
And again, the past is becoming less relevant, with that Saturn and Pisces energy, and with this new pioneering energy, and then Pluto destroying the old guard. It's like, yeah, well, that's your old story. And again, Mercury's getting pinged a lot. So our way of understanding things is undergoing significant shift. And I feel like that's as important as anything in actually tangibly changing the lay of the land reality, day-to-day reality is change it up here and at least recognize that there's other possibilities.
Yeah, like infinite.
Yeah.
It's wow. And to have people opening up to literally infinite possibilities, because this is infinity. We are infinity. We are that field. So, wow, you look at what we have accepted as c'est la vie, this is just the way it is. Well, that was this tiny matrix program in the midst of this infinite universe and infinite universes. Okay, so we experience that. We understand now what that experience is. And maybe once upon a time we're just window shopping in the mall of the universe, and we thought, God, look at that weird store. I wonder what that would be like. And so, okay, 3D planet Earth being a humanoid. It's like we tried that. What would it be like to be one of those creatures and go and just give all your power away and live in fear? And God, that's weird. So now we know.
Yeah, now we know, and it's time to take it back.
It's like, okay, that was interesting. And now let's go to look at some other shops in the mall of the universe.
Yeah. So, well, I wanted to keep this fairly close to 45 minutes to an hour. So probably a good point to end on, just the potential. So this could be it could feel a little bit rocky, but don't get discouraged that, you got the preview of other things, and no, they haven't all come into being yet. But I certainly I talk with a lot of people, and so I notice themes. These people have nothing in common except they're all having these expansive futures kind of dangling in front of them, like, ooh, there's something coming. And so, if a collective is having a dangling future of something coming, and we're all kind of focusing on that and bringing in the new, it's incredibly empowering.
Yeah. And there is only one great power, and that's that universal energy we call love. Mm-hmm. Like that simple 3-word sentence in the New Testament, God is love.
Yeah.
So using the term God to represent the field of infinite possibilities. Okay, the essence of that field in its infinite wholeness, that's what love is. Mm-hmm. And so if we approach it with that energy, that gives us the faith to move forward, regardless of how uncomfortable it may be to extricate ourselves from some of the little glitches that are still Klingons here.
Yeah. And I feel like that's also where Venus in Leo is going to help out, with Leo being the sign of the heart and Venus being the goddess of love, right? There is this heart expansion, and I feel like that's really going to be the key, especially for the next 4 months or so.
Yeah. And the willingness to just be done with what we had perceived as reality and accepted as reality, and open up to the possibilities in front of us, which are really fantastic. And if we set ourselves free to dream that future, we're putting our own universal creative energy into that. Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I think we'll reconnect when Pluto stations direct, if not before then. So always a pleasure having you on here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Take care.